Now we will discuss an important topic, and that is peer-to-peer lending. Now this is important for your upcoming PMT6 as well as for your prelims 2018. So moving on to peer-to-peer lending. Now peer-to-peer lending is also known as P2P lending. Now what is this peer-to-peer lending? Now it is a lending that takes place on an online platform, and the speciality of this lending is that it happens without the involvement of banks or any other formal financial institutions. So in short, you can say that peer-to-peer lending or P2P lending is a digital marketplace for loans. So let's now look into how exactly this P2P lending works. Now in P2P lending, we have three entities. The first is the online platform or the P2P lending platform, which are basically the tech companies that are being registered under the Companies Act. And we have the borrowers, who can be individuals or small businesses, and also lenders who wish to invest. Now what happens is that initially the borrowers as well as lenders register themselves with the online platform. Now the online platform, what it does is that it does an initial screening or rather a verification process, and those who are found acceptable will be allowed to take part in the online lending. Now how do they do this initial screening? They mainly depend upon the information that they get from the credit bureaus as well as their own research. So once the registration is done, the borrowers will be filing their loan request on the online platform. Now these loan requests will be containing information regarding the borrowers, their income, their credit history, and the amount that they wish to raise, as well as the purpose for which they are wishing to raise a loan. So such kind of information will be there in the loan request. So there will be multiple borrowers who will be filing or making their request on the platform. Now the lenders will now be able to go through these loan requests, and they will choose those borrowers to whom they wish to lend. So in that way, what the platform does is that they bring together the borrowers as well as the lenders. Now this is how the P2P lending works. Now when you go through the newspaper, you will also come across a term that is called as a reverse auction model, that is associated with the P2P lending. Now what is this reverse auction model? In reverse auction model, what happens is that here the lender will be bidding for the borrower's loan proposal, and in this model the borrowers will be having the freedom to either choose or reject a lender, that is depending upon their interest rates. So that is what is involved in the reverse auction model. So this is how the P2P lending works. So what is the benefit of this P2P lending? Now to the platform, the benefit is that they will be charging a fee both from the lenders as well as the borrowers, which can either be a fixed rate or such as its percentage of the loan amount that is being raised. Now to the borrowers, the advantage is that they will be able to raise funds at an interest rate which is less when compared to the loans that they raise from the banks, which are at a higher interest rate. So for the borrowers, the P2P lending platform offers an option for a cheap fundraising. So that is the advantage or the benefit to the borrowers. Now when it comes to the lenders, the benefit is that they will be able to lend their money, and they will be able to earn interest rate which is higher when compared to their deposits in the banks, where the interest rate is comparatively less. So it is a win-win situation to all. So that is the advantage, or that is the benefit that the P2P lending platform offers. So now it seems to be an attractive investment option. But there is a problem. Now what is the problem? The problem is that these are unsecured loans. Now what do you mean by these unsecured loans? These are given without any collateral, unlike the banks where the collateral is being made. So what happens is that since they are unsecured loans, there is always a risk of default from the borrowers. So to avoid the risk of default, what the online platforms does is that they encourage for diversifying of the funds. That is, the lenders will be encouraged to lend to multiple borrowers. Now certain online platforms do not allow the individuals to fund more than certain percentage of the borrower's requirement. Now these are basically aimed at minimizing the exposure to risk. Now this is how the risk of default is being minimized, and that happens mainly due to the unsecured loans. Now Why exactly is this P2P lending important? It's mainly because of the Government of India notification which said that the entities that are involved in the P2P lending will be treated as non-banking financial companies and they will be regulated by RBI. Now recently RBI also came with a guideline and that's termed as Non-Banking Financial Company Peer-to-Peer Lending Platform Reserve Bank Directions of 2017. Now we will quickly go through the guidelines that the RBI has put forward. The first thing is in regard to the registration of the entities. That is, the RBI has made it clear that those entities which are already involved in the P2P lending or those entities which are planning to get involved in the P2P lending as the P2P lending platforms have to register themselves with the RBI and they should also satisfy certain preconditions. The first thing is that they need to be companies and they need to be incorporated in India, and then they should have the adequate capital structure to carry out the businesses associated with the P2P lending. That is, the capital that has been mandated for now is 2 crore. And then they should also have the resources to offer the services. Resources mainly refers to the technological, entrepreneurial as well as the managerial resources to offer these services that are associated with the P2P lending. Along with it, RBI has also put in certain norms on the P2P lending platforms. Now what the RBI has said is that these platforms should actually act as intermediaries. That is, their role should be to bringing together the borrowers as well as the lenders, and the lending as well as the borrowing activity should not get reflected in their balance sheet. That is, and they should not raise loans or raise any deposits on their own. Again, the company cannot provide for or arrange any credit enhancement or credit guarantee. That is, the companies or the P2P lending platforms are not supposed to provide for any assured return, that is directly or indirectly. So that is next. And then in regard to the default related information, now the P2P lending platforms will have to share the default related information on the borrowers to the credit bureaus. Now till now what had happened is that the platforms were able to access the information regarding the borrowers from the credit bureaus, but they were not supposed to share the information regarding the default of the borrowers to the credit bureaus. But now with this guideline, what is intended or what the impact will be that if a borrower defaults in the P2P lending platform, that will be shared with the credit bureaus and that will be automatically reflected in the credit score of the borrower. So this can also affect the person taking loans from the banks or any other formal financial institutions. So that is in regard to the default related information on the borrowers. And then the P2P lending platforms are also supposed to share the credit information of the borrowers to the lenders, so that lenders will be able to take informed decisions regarding whom they need to lend to. So these are the various norms that have been put forward or put on the P2P lending platform. The RBI has also put forward the exposure limits in order to reduce the risk associated with the P2P lending, and it mentions that the aggregate exposure of a lender to the all borrowers as well as the aggregate loan that is taken up by a borrower should be less than 10 lakhs. So that is the first thing. Second is that the exposure of a single lender to the same borrower should not exceed 50,000 and the maturity period of the loan is not to exceed 36 months. Next is in regard to the fund transfer. RBI has made it clear that all transactions that will take place will have to be bank transactions, that is the bank-to-bank transfers, and the cash transfers will be strictly prohibited. Now this is with an aim to reduce the risk of or the threat of money laundering. And then the fund transfer between the participants will have to pass through the escrow account. Now what is this escrow account? It's an account that is being held by a third party when a transaction happens between two parties, and it is supposed to be a temporary account which will operate until the transaction is being complete. So the fund transfer will be happening through the escrow account, and this will not be reflected on the balance sheet of the online platform, and the international flow of the funds will be prohibited. And the RBI has also made it clear that there needs to be a proper grievance redressal mechanism which can be accessed by both the borrowers as well as the lenders. RBI in the guidelines have also mentioned about the need to have adequate safeguards to ensure the data security, given the risk associated with cyber security. So these are the main guidelines that has been given out recently by RBI, and RBI will be soon coming up with the further clarifications on these norms. So these are the main things in regard to P2P lending, what is it, what is its status in India, as well as the guidelines. Thank you.